Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today is someone that, when you have those people and I hold them in such high regard and it seems like they're so untouchable and so amazing and oh my gosh, I could never be like you. You're so wonderful. How did you ever do all that stuff? Your book is so brilliant. And then all of a sudden, here they are talking to me. Like, that's how I feel today. I know I feel that way about a number of my guests. And today I've got Marilee Adams, who is an award-winning author and a pioneer in the field of inquiry-based coaching, leadership, and organizational effectiveness. Her book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, has sold over 400,000 copies in 22 languages, and most of that is because of word of mouth. And you can find her at inquiryinstitute.com. Now, I will just say, it was word of mouth that got me to buy this book and read it as well. It was Dr. Sabrina Starling, whom I guess you know, Marilee, yeah?
Mm-hmm, I do. I know her and like and respect her.
Yeah, same here. And she is a constant ongoing advocate of change your questions, change your life. And everybody in her circles, including me now, and all the people that work with me, we're always talking about the choice map and you've got the option and so let's talk a little bit. Maybe we should just start by let's talk about that choice map. Let's talk about your approach, change your questions, change your life. By the way, you've got a 4th edition of the book out now that it's just gone so far and so wide. And I think that there's a new chapter in there about the neurobiology of this whole thing, the neuroscience of
switching.
Switching, which you talk about in your choice map. So listen, let me stop talking and why don't you just give us a little bit of an intro into what your approach is and what I'm gushing about here.
Well, first of all, John, thank you so much. It's including your gushing.
Well, it's all honest, that's for sure.
Yeah. And what I like about that is, yes, it's about me, but it's also about the work. And it's what I've learned over the years of doing this work of what a huge impact it makes, which I didn't know in the beginning. But I'm completely in love with inquiry and questions and learning, and it all gets rolled up into the book, the Change Your Questions book, which is a story, and all of the material in it, the coaching material in it, is integrated into the story. So it's a quick read. We also have a workbook that just came out. And that book has led to many things. It's really changed my life. It's got me on your show, for one thing, but it's also gotten me into some of the world's largest organizations and government agencies and teaching. Was a professor, adjunct professor of leadership at American University. I now teach at the Weatherhead education at Case Western Reserve. And we also have students who come to us from all over the world. It's all virtual now, so it's easier. Because the material is sticky and it works.
Yeah.
And
so, you do public workshops. Like, you're not only in big organizations like Lockheed Martin or DHL or something. You also have workshops that are open to the public, yeah?
I do, and it's not DHL, it was DHS.
DHS. Well, oops, sorry.
Well, I might have done something for DHL. Anyway.
Maybe it's a prediction.
Well, I have done a lot of work at Lockheed Martin and Johnson & Johnson and a lot of different government agencies. And, people, I've been doing this so long, and people say, well, aren't you kind of tired of this? And I go, are you kidding? I'm more excited now than I was when I started because I see the results of it. And also,
and that's exciting. Yeah,
very exciting. So,
totally.
it really makes me smile when I know that the work works and that we get emails from people all the time about this changed my life, it changed my coaching, it changed my leadership, it changed how I am with my family, with my partner, with my children. And I've gotten so much of that that I've come to really understand that it really does have that impact. And a funny example of that is maybe 10 years ago, I gave a keynote in Beijing. And it was the first time I had been simultaneously translated, and most of the audience spoke Chinese, of course. And at the end, this gentleman came up to me and, in very broken English, said, I'm going to tell you what he said, and then I'm going to tell you what it means because I haven't set it up. But he
Okay.
said, we have a judger organization. Can you come help us?
That's great.
What I'm referring to, for so that people aren't confused, is that the choice map that John mentioned earlier uh, depicts, it's an illustration, a graphic, and it depicts our mindsets and the questions we ask from each mindset. And each of us has both mindsets, always will. One is judger, which I just mentioned, and the other is learner. And we'll get into that some more in the conversation. But when we human beings are in judger mindset, we tend to be more closed-minded, not to listen well, um, not to be supportive of people, to be critical. And that's what he was talking about. He said, this is how our organization works and it doesn't work. And that he understood that, and English was obviously his second or maybe third or fourth, I don't know, language, but he got it intuitively. And I think intuitively is something that marks how people get the work and integrate it and use it very naturally and pretty easily. And I think that's really why the book has done so well and why we get so many requests from people all over the world. It's not because of me. I mean, I'm not that well known, but the work is. And for me, that's much more important.
Yeah. Now, Marilee, I think sometimes you're bumping that nice mic you've got. I think you're getting excited and bumping a little bit. But
Maybe
so,
I'll try to, I'll center my hands here.
okay, not a worry. Um, yes. So, I think what you did in this book is really tapped into just some like something that is just absolutely fundamental to human beings. And the way that I heard it, the way that I heard it, like in a different way at a different place, but I think that goes with this is just this, this thing that we have when we don't observe ourselves.
Hmm.
We just love to be right and we just love to make other people wrong. And until we examine what that actually gets us, we think that that's great, right? Like, oh, I'm right, they're all wrong, I'm winning, but we're losing all the stuff that really matters to us, like love and affinity and happiness. And you know what I mean? And I think that's that judger mindset that you talk about in the choice map. And to get this overlay that's in your book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, to get that overlay on that is really, really powerful. And then to get ways to bring ourselves back to noticing what we're doing and then making that choice to be curious, right, versus judgmental. It's just so brilliant.
Well, it's very simple and it's also very complex. And I worked hard
Yes.
to make it accessible. And what you just said is accurate. Human nature, most of the time, people want to be right. The problem is it's impossible. And also, sometimes we get hurt by being right, or we don't get enough information, and we certainly don't get the best relationships. And you're right, that's judger mindset. And but remember, we all have judger
Yeah.
and we all have learner. So I mentioned something about judger. I'll say something about learner. So when we're in learner mindset, when we're open-minded, we're curious, which you mentioned, and our goal really in a conversation or in any moment is to be aware, to be connected, to be appreciative, and it's more win-win. And judger mindset is more win-lose. But remember, we all have both. So what's simple but important is being able to observe what mindset we're in moment by moment, because that's the only way we really have a choice. If we notice that we're in judger, and here's the kicker, to notice non-judgmentally, then then we can switch to learner if we're willing and wanting to do that. So it's incredibly important to increase the ability to observe and increase awareness. And as you know, John, that's also the basis of emotional intelligence. And it's also the basis, awareness is also the basis of change. So the ability to notice moment by moment what mindset we're in, as well as what questions we're asking ourselves from that mindset, becomes incredibly important and useful. And I want to segue that because there's something I said that I want to underscore, which is most of the time when people think about question asking, they think it's interpersonal, which of course it is, and that's vital. What most people don't know is that the way that we think is also driven by the questions we're asking ourselves. And when we become better and better observers, aware observers of the questions we're asking ourselves, we also can say, what mindset did that question come from? And and let's say it's judger, if I stay in this mindset, will I get the relationships and results that I want? Truly. And the answer is typically no. So and there are costs to being a judger. So that becomes motivating. And remember, we all have judger. So I'm not being judgmental about judger. I'm being factual about it. We all have it. But that doesn't mean that we have to stay there, nor does it mean that it's bad. Because people tend to think judger bad, learner good. That's not so. Judger is really an artifact of our brain, as we were talking about, John, before the show. So when we go into judger, and it's a moment by moment phenomenon, typically the amygdala is on fire, that part of our
Yeah.
brain that goes into fight or flight, and it's very reactive. The issue is, however, that we can't be productive or responsive or forward thinking if we're only in reaction mode. So I've had an interesting experience recently, interviewing people who have been through a 4-day training with me and, and,
Uh-huh.
and with my company. Because I'm not the only one, but we have a lot of really fine facilitators and trainers and coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's one of the first times that I've interviewed people afterwards rather than before. And I've been struck by how many of them have said, the biggest takeaway is now I pause. Now I step back and think. Now I know I can choose my mindset. I can choose the impact I want to have on that person or this situation. But and of course, the more you practice this, the more it becomes second nature to you. And
Yeah.
I love that because they're reinforcing emotional intelligence, appreciative inquiry, um, just about all of the really fine leadership and coach literature and practice that we know. And I think that's why the book has gotten so popular because it also reinforces all of what we know really works with human beings and what works for leaders.
Yeah. I mean, I think that just to highlight a few of the points you made, I think that the book is extremely accessible. And I think that one of the things that I love about how you talk about all this is, and you've been doing it here already in our conversation, we all have both. We have judger, we have learner. And the hilarious, I guess maybe there's some irony of being able to notice your judger non-judgmentally, right? Like and the fact that judger mindset has us asking questions, not just interpersonally, but asking questions of ourselves that are actually fairly destructive. Like, what's wrong with me? Right? Like, that's a judger question versus a learner question, which might be, very close, but, what's going on with me or what's up with me versus what's wrong with me, right?
Well, I'm gonna tweak that a little bit
Please. Yeah.
because first of all, we ask ourselves questions all the time, minute by minute, and sometimes they're learner and sometimes they're judger.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that our questions are only judger; it's the ability to notice them.
Yeah.
And then, which also has this fall directly into the mindfulness traditions, because
Yes.
being centered and mindful requires a moment by moment by moment awareness. And this supports that. And for some people, makes it more accessible for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that in the background of everything you're saying. I have a meditation practice myself. And I mean, one of the greatest things about that is it affords me that opportunity, that pause, right? Like it kind of increases the space between something happening and me reacting, right? And allows me to have more choice in that.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
yeah, and so I love that you're making that more accessible, through what is, it's not like your book is like sit down and meditate and say om, it's very, very accessible. Um, so uh, I had a question and I zoned my question now. But I do think that it's also interesting because what you're doing is fundamentally based in the neurobiology of what it is to be a human being. I think that's one of the reasons your book has sold so many copies in so many languages, um, because it's just, you're talking about something that's just fundamental to being human, and you're talking about it in a way that's compassionate.
That's
That's what I was trying to get to with the noticing. We have both, nothing wrong with them, just noticing them and making a choice of what's going to actually serve us, right?
Yeah, and to add to that, compassion is very hard to get to from Judger. In fact, I don't think you can. You know,
Mm,
so it's noticing Judger, choosing to switch, having tools and methods for doing that, um, which are switching questions and somatic practices. Soma means body, so like
yep.
breathing practices, ways to get yourself back centered. Um,
Yep.
but switching is key. And
Yeah.
when you switch, and this is illustrated on the choice map, that's when compassion, empathy, acceptance, forgiveness become available. So, the first beginning of that is switching, and then this whole world opens up that's not accessible when we're in Judger.
So I want to just tell people that are listening, you can get a copy for free of the choice map.
Mhm.
And you can go to inquiryinstitute.com, fill out a quick little survey, and get that choice map. And a lot of the most successful business people that I know have that choice map up where they can see it.
Yep.
Because because that's one of the greatest ways to be able to catch yourself in the moment, right? Is
Right.
there's the choice map and like something happens and, oh, there's the choice map. I feel myself going one way. Is that what I want? Now I know that there's a number of them in the book, but would you be willing to share with us one of the practices that you talk about in order to catch ourselves and make that switch? Could you give us an idea
Sure.
of what?
This one, I'll give you one. It's not in the book, but it's one
Okay.
that we use quite a lot in our trainings because you can't teach this material just intellectually and cognitively. It doesn't
Yeah.
live only in our heads, it lives in our bodies, as we live in our bodies, not just our heads. So, switching has to involve the body. It has to, because we feel our emotions in our bodies, oftentimes before we're even aware of it. So, a very simple practice, and I'll give a reference for it also. It's called hands on heart, and it's simply what you do is put your hand, one hand or two, on your heart, breathe deeply and slowly and comfortably, and then bring to mind some person or situation where you feel completely safe, and hold that image, and then also feeling the warmth of your hand, the rising of your and falling of your chest, and then link the image with the breathing and just stay there for a few moments, allowing your body to settle down, to become centered, and then bring yourself back when you're ready to do that. It
Yeah.
only takes a minute. So
Yeah.
that practice is from a book by Linda Graham called Bouncing Back. She also has one called Resilience, and we use it quite a lot. And in these interviews I've been doing, which is with an intelligence agency, we did a pretty extended training there, and it's remarkable how many of them have mentioned, well, I now pause. I put my hand here. I start to breathe. I notice that I can think better, that I'm more present. Now, these are all qualities of learner also.
Yeah.
So we're switching into learner. It's biological, it's neurological, and it's also psychological. It's intentional. So
Yeah.
very small practice for a very large impact. Plus, it's good for your blood pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, and your overall health, I got to imagine. So Marilee, as I said, you have achieved a modicum of success in your life, and people looking at you, 400,000 copies, 22 languages, working with all these amazing clients. Did you have a down moment in your career? Like, was there ever a place where you were like, thought it was done, or you had failed, or like, is there a moment like that?
Well, there is, and actually, there's a little story about it in the book because it turned out to be incredibly instructional for me, and it's one of the things that led to my developing all of this material. And it's when I was working on my dissertation,
Uh-huh.
and I had completed a piece of writing that I thought was really terrific, and I thought my advisor would love it, and I just couldn't wait to hear all of his wonderful things that he had to say about it. And what he said to me, this is a quote, Marilee, this is not acceptable.
Ouch.
And my stomach just fell. And somehow miraculously, instead of what I typically would have done in the past and did many, many times, was like want to go to bed and pull up the covers and, goodbye world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that moment, somehow I got it together to switch and to say, okay, how do I fix it? And I
Mm.
turned it around. And we had a very productive conversation that led to a very good piece of writing that led to the praise I thought I was going to get in the beginning. And then afterwards, I started thinking, what did I do? How did I do that? And is
Yeah.
there something there I can capture that I can also give to other people? And this was quite a long time
Brilliant.
ago. But what
Uh-huh.
I was actually doing was observing myself, and then doing a reflection on what I had done and doing it like a scientist or like a researcher or like
Yeah.
a reporter. Operationally, what happened internally that I was able to change? I didn't have the word switch then. I didn't have,
Yeah.
oops, the choice map or any of
Yeah.
this work. It was just before I developed it. but I realized that something had happened. It wasn't like it just fell out of the sky. And I was determined to find out what had happened. And that turns out to be the methodology that's now baked into everything I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Wow.
thank him for that. And I thank myself for taking it as an instruction rather than putting me down. I knew he was
Yeah.
on my side, but
Yeah.
he was giving me feedback. I didn't like it, but it was useful, which is much
Yeah.
more important to me than whether I liked it or not.
Yeah. Well, cause I wonder, like the question that I'm now really asking myself, you probably asked yourself too, why did you do that in that moment? I mean, like, is it possible that part of the reason that you were able to do that is because you did know that he was on your side? Like what, like
It's
instead
it's
of just going to bed and pulling up the covers, right?
I want to distinguish between why and how.
Okay.
So I could answer why um, because I wanted to get my dissertation done and graduate.
Right. Yeah.
But that is not the how, and it's the how that's important.
Yes.
And people have said that my work is for them like a missing how to in all, not all of, but many of the change methodologies that are out there. And there are just tons of books about coaching and leadership and teams and all of that stuff. And a lot of them are really great, but they aren't necessarily telling you how. They're
Yeah.
telling you what. They might tell
Yes.
you why, but you also need a how.
Yeah.
And so being able to observe your mindset, this isn't what I was doing at that moment, but being able to notice what's going on with me. And so now I'm going to make up questions I could have been asking myself in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want it to end here? Is he on my side? Does he have something that he could say that would be helpful? What kind of relationship do I want with him? What could I learn from this? And I did what you described earlier. Instead of getting reactive, angry, upset, self doubting, hiding under the covers, I got curious.
Yeah.
So there was a stimulus, his comment. There was the moment of reactivity. There was noticing I was reactive. There was asking myself, what do I really want? Getting curious about it. So you see, that's operational. That's a
Yeah.
how. And
Yeah.
it leads to what I now call switching questions.
Yeah.
And that switched my mindset that I didn't know. I mean, this was such a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, but, and you and I were talking off camera, or, before the show about how what's really useful. And what's really useful is being able to be aware, to observe, to be responsive, not reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that kicked in there. And now, of course, I've elaborated it into a, a, a lot of material that's in the book and that's in our courses, and that we teach people, and that it works. How do I know it works? Because I see it, they tell me, and you just simply wouldn't have sold that many books if it didn't work. Because those are like a dentist who bought 42 copies for his large team, or leaders and coaches and learning and development people and change agents and consultants. They're all using the material, including with teams, because you could have a judger team or a learner team. They're very different.
Yeah.
And also with organizational culture.
I'll give you a metaphor.
Okay.
When I went surfing around the world with my two surfer buddies,
Uh-huh.
I was the only one before we went. I was the only one who knew life saving and, first aid and, all that kind CPR and everything. Before we left for that trip, I made darn sure those two got educated in that as well, because it doesn't help me if I know CPR,
Right.
right? And I have a feeling that that's kind of what this is for people. It's like, hey, I got this for myself. I want everybody around me to have this too,
Right.
right?
Actually, which you know, in firehouses, you see they have a sign, stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah,
And it's like you want to have that so well nailed in you that
yeah,
in an emergency it just is reactive, but it's a trained reactivity. It's not
yeah.
a reactive reactivity. And
Yes, yes.
so switching questions, the way that we teach them is it's like stop, drop, and roll. It's like you get a switching question that helps you switch in the moment before you
Right.
get yourself into trouble. And the more you
Yeah.
practice, the more you make it a habit, the more effective you are at it. So it's also contagious personally and contagious interpersonally when we can do that. It
Yeah.
changes everything, actually.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that it's the subtitle of your book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, 12 powerful tools for leadership coaching in life. So I do, it is a how-to. A really great contribution to the world, Marilee. I'm just it's really, really good what you got here.
Well, I'll tell you. Oh, first of all, the subtitle of the fourth edition is 12 Powerful Tools for Leadership Coaching and Results. And I think that's really important.
That's
And
good. Yeah.
when you say a contribution to the world, um, actually, I have a personal mission about that, that I call this learner living, and we talk about learner world. But
Mm-hmm.
pretty much history is marked by judger thinking and behavior, which I
Bingo.
know you know. But
Yeah.
but the issue is it's not going to help us. And so if we want to be positive and proactive and productive, we need to be in learner. And that's outlined, it's really a graphic. It's how the choice map works. So I want a choice map in every office, in every schoolroom. I also have a book called Teaching That Changes Lives. It's the same material for educators and students. And I want one on every refrigerator because look, think about the difference between a judger relationship and a learner relationship. And there's
Yeah.
even an anecdote in the book, in Change Your Questions, where our hero Ben gets the choice map from his coach. He puts it on his refrigerator, and his wife steals it and takes it to work. So
Yeah.
I want to paper the world with the choice map and with the perspectives and skills that that implies, because learner living in a learner world, that's what our mission is really all about.
Well, you remind me that I have a 6-year-old son,
Hmm.
and I am really, really, I've really taken on being in learner with him versus being in judger, and it can be a little bit tough, right? When he breaks that expensive thing of mine, or when he like spills the thing I asked him not to take in there on the carpet, and I'm still not perfect at it, but it's definitely who I want to be with him,
Well, I'll give you
and what I'm, yeah.
a very quick story about that.
Okay.
So, we've done some work with Expedia. One of their top managers was in one of our courses, and she told the story in one of the webinars. She said, I was working at home, and obviously she had shown the choice map to her 6-year-old son. This is what made me think of it. And she said, my son came running in and he said, Mommy, Mommy, you've got to print something for me. And she said, Well, what? He said, that choice map thing. And she said, Okay, I'll do that. Why do you want it? And he said, My friend just made a judger decision and I have to help him.
Wow.
I was so blown away that it was that intuitive,
Yeah.
and it aroused his empathy,
Mm-hmm.
which was clearly there. his decision making, I'm sure she did not explain to him that the choice map was about decision making. He's 6 years old, but
Yeah.
he got it, and that's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. So, John, I invite you to share
Yeah.
the choice map with your son.
Yes. I'm just
When you
thinking
do it,
about
yeah,
all the new copies I need to print out and put in other places.
yeah, yeah. Wouldn't life be better if most of the people were in learner most of the time?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm behind you on your mission, Marilee. I think it's a great mission, and I think it makes a difference. And I know a lot of people who talk about you on a nearly daily basis. So thank you so much for
Hmm.
joining me here and taking your time to share this with us. I'll put all the links in the show notes and everything. And so we only have about 5 more minutes before we got to go, I know. But is there anything I didn't ask you or anything that you'd just like to say before we wrap it up? That
You mean in 5 minutes rather than a few hours?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yes, actually. Um, it's so simple. It's really so simple. Get curious. Take yourself to curiosity no matter what happens.
Mm,
Take yourself to curiosity. Curiosity about yourself, about the other person, about what you want to have happen that would be positive and productive, and then which will take you into learner mindset. And that matters whether you're just being a human being at the grocery store. And by the way, I share the choice map at the grocery store sometimes late at night when nobody's around, and I get into a conversation with people.
yeah.
But I've seen this work whether you're just being yourself as a regular person, whether you're a leader or a coach or a parent or an intentional change maker. Pay attention to the mindset you're in, the questions you're asking yourself, the questions you ask others, and also remember the great results begin with great questions. And so the more that we can bring our best selves forward, and one of my favorite switching questions, John, is who do I choose to be in this moment?
Mm,
Over and over, moment by moment, regardless of the situation, regardless of what's happened, regardless of who the people are, we still have agency. So it's not somebody else's fault. They may have done something that really triggered my judger. I'm responsible for what I do with that. So this is really a methodology for personal empowerment. And also just keep remembering, who do I choose to be in this moment? Do I choose to stay in judger? Do I choose to go learner? Who do I choose to be in this moment? And if anybody who is listening or watching remembers just that, then I feel like we got our job done.
yes. Yes. Thank you so much for joining me, Marilee. I look forward to staying in touch, and I
Me too.
definitely support your mission of getting that choice map everywhere. And I love the question, who do I choose to be in this
In
moment?
this moment, and this
Yeah.
moment, and this moment. I can't help the teacher in me.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. We wanted all of you. So thank you for joining us. And those of you listening, thank you for joining us. If you like Speak Like a Leader show, we'd appreciate it if you'd share it with people that you know who might also enjoy it. And if you want to give us a 5-star rating, that certainly helps us get a little more visibility. And Marilee,
Hmm.
thank you again for
Thank you.
joining us. Really great to have you.
And a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And we'll hear you next time on Speak Like a Leader show. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.